While you're turning there, let me mention a name of somebody that you may or may not know. The name is Pete Rose. How many have heard the name of Pete Rose before? I would say a few of us have. He was a baseball player that was best known with the Cincinnati Reds. And I do not claim to be a baseball fan necessarily. I'll turn it on once a year for a couple of outs or innings, and that's about it. But I do know that he was one of the best baseball players to ever play the game, and had the all-time hits record. And for most athletes that have great success in their sport, they have this way of being taken care of afterwards. And when you walk into the stadium, for years to come, their jerseys will be retired. Nobody will be able to wear that number ever again. And they often get speaking kind of engagements, commercials. Well after they're done playing, you still see people that you go, man, they're getting older. It's been years since they've played. And yet there's opportunities that come because of the success that they have done. They have opportunities to manage, to coach teams. Cooperstown, New York has a full display of Hall of Fame baseball athletes. And it's an honor to be a part of that. Teams build on parts to their stadiums to honor these players. And so they definitely, when there is success in their sport, they are recognized and they have it all. And for Pete Rose, though, his story was different. Those things he does not have today. Because after an investigation, it was realized that not only after he played, when he coached for a couple of years, that he would gamble and he would bet on his team. And not only did he bet, but every single night he bet. And baseball felt that jeopardized what was supposed to be real. And so he paid for it. He paid for it. And the worst thing, for 14 years, he lied and said that he did not do it. And he was so adamant about being right, so adamant about not wanting to lose it all, not wanting to lose everything that he had coming, that he would spend 14 years trying to tell a story that just wasn't true. And what happened? He lost everything. His jersey's not retired. He's not in the Hall of Fame. There were special events that the Reds did that he was not invited to. They had one thing that they did, is they put him on this all-century team. 100 years of the best players. And you would think that this would be his one moment that he could enjoy all of his accomplishments. And afterwards, an announcer said to him, "Now, are you ready to admit?" In the middle of all of this, he still carried the weight of what happened long after it was gone. And a man who had everything, because of whatever it was, money, because of wanting to be right, because of wanting to get ahead, it destroyed his life. This idea of, I have to have this. In the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about baggage. We've been talking about the things in our life that we carry, and the things that weigh us down. And one of those things is this idea that I have to have what I want to have. This area that Jesus calls greed that is in our lives. This stuff that is in our lives. And I know with anger and guilt and those type of things the last couple weeks, that's kind of emotions and those stuff. But literally today, we're going to look at literal stuff that you and I have in our lives that can create barriers between us and God. Luke chapter 12, Jesus tells a story of a rich man who had everything, but what he had became the focus of his life. Luke chapter 12, verse 13 Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbitrator between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." I know just a little bit different reading. Just keep following with me. This is the NIV this morning that uses this word greed. So we have Jesus that's asked this question. Here he's teaching, and we know that Jesus is a spiritual teacher, a spiritual man. And so that's how he's viewed as society there. And so here we have something out of the blue as somebody's asking him a financial question. What do I do in this situation? How do I divide my inheritance here? But here's what Jesus teaches is a principle that it's more than just what we do with what we've been given. It's more than just what we do with what our money is and our possessions and our finances and our wallets. It's more than that. It's how we look at it. As he begins to shift this story to greed. And then he tells this story. And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced good crop. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God." Here we see a story of a man who has a lot of stuff in this passage of Scripture. He's a man that's very rich. And not just a lot of things, but he has more than what he needs. And he comes up with this scenario. What do I do with this extra stuff? What do I do with the things that is more than what I would need? And before we jump any further, it's really easy to look at this sometimes and to say, well, there's nothing wrong with saving back. There's nothing wrong with putting aside something. And that's true, but we have to remember why Jesus is telling this story is because he's giving us an example of how greed can start. How greed can take root in our hearts. And as we look, this definition of greed is a lot broader than what I would care for. I would like to just say it's this level, and if I have this much stuff, that's bad, and this is okay, but this isn't. But Jesus really defines it very more narrow here than what I would like to be comfortable with. And here's what he says, is it's what is in the heart, and this idea of saying, I have to have more. I have to have more. Here's another point in this parable that jumps out to me, is that in a lot of the parables that Jesus teaches, he tells stories, right? He tells stories of a man who planted something, or he tells stories of a man who traveled away and came back to see what happened with his possessions. But very rarely do you see in a parable where he literally plainly says, then God said something. Most of the time it's like the person that goes away represents God. But Jesus made it very, very super clear that God says somebody who just is interested in just more and as much as we can get in this life. This is not what he expects from us at all. This is not at all okay as we look at this. And so how do we see the things that this man did that make it greedy? If Jesus is so intent on not only telling this story, but making sure that we know God does not approve of this, then what in the story is considered greed? And it comes down to this one point here. And if you've got your handout, write this down. The root of greed is that I owe myself. That I owe it to me to do this. That I'm entitled to this. Just like other areas of baggage, greed is this, starts with this feeling that somebody owes me something. In guilt, it's that I feel that I owe you. That I'll be willing to let this hold over my head just to please you, to try to not get over something that God clearly wants me to get over. And guilt can be that way. We talked last week about anger. And how anger is this idea that you owe me, and I hold it over your head. And I treat you certain ways, and I treat others certain ways because I believe that you have hurt me, and now you owe it to me. And greed starts with the same idea of owing something, but it's that I owe it to myself. Look at the story. The first thing we see from this man is that he had more than what he needed. He had more than what he needed. Instead of acknowledging that I could have more than what I need to help others. Or why do I have more than what I need? Is there a reason? Is there a responsibility that goes with having more than what I need? Instead of that, he tried to hold on to it. He tried to keep it for himself and his enjoyment. Another thing that shows this greed here in this man is that he assumed that he wasn't responsible to anyone for what he had. We don't see anywhere in here where there's any advice that he goes to get from someone, where he asks his family what he should do. This is a sole decision to say, I want to please me, and this is what I'm going to do. And he's not responsible for anyone. There's a passage in Psalms in 24 that has this concept that I believe is so important for us to remember, is that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. And I know I've said this before, but it doesn't say that Christian people and the things that Christian people have is the Lord's, and who doesn't belong to Christ isn't the Lord's. That's not what it says. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. So whether we recognize that God has given it to us or not, it's His. It's His, whether we admit it or not. And so this idea that everything that I have was God's to begin with and is on loan to me, he missed that completely. He thought that it was all there for himself. Another thing that we see is he was thinking of himself. Who was the only one that was going to enjoy these riches? We don't see passing this on to anyone. We don't see even passing on to family members. And we could have a... This is all about him eating and drinking and being merry. And if you look at... this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns. Then I will store all my grain. Then I'll say to myself, take, eat, and be merry. His whole focus was, what I have is for me. What I have is for me. Another area, just in case you're not convinced that this is greed and him owing himself, is that he wasn't satisfied with the barns that he had. Notice it doesn't say he wanted to add on to them. I have this and I want to just add on to it. He was going to tear down what he had and start all over again. And it's this idea that what I have is not good enough. And this is really hard, I think especially today, although it's been an ancient problem, especially today because we have the media. And in between whatever show that we might watch, a ball game or our favorite movie, no matter how good that it is, in between wedged are these things that come on our televisions for about 60 seconds or so. And the commercials only take 20 minutes just to say, this is something that you have, or that you don't have that you need. I was watching a special one time, and I don't know that I'll remember and get all this right, but the late night TV, those hour-long infomercials kind of thing. And you know what they say? They try to start this off with all these companies. This is what they try to start it off with, is we need to create a problem in your life. And then we have the product that will solve that. Wouldn't that be about right? You see the commercial and it's a kitchen kind of thing and someone's in the kitchen and you think, boy, they're clumsy and they're fumbling through and all that. Is this what your kitchen looks like, right? And they say, we have a solution for you. And because this is over and over again bombarded, we subtly begin to think, you know what? I am here to just please myself and get what I want. And this idea that I'm not satisfied with what I have. That something I could have been so excited about. I remember as a kid being so excited about something that you'd get for Christmas. And then just a few months later, you didn't even know where it was at. And it's like, wow, what happened to that? There's something that's replaced it. And this idea of not being satisfied. And guess what the root is? It's greed. It's that I owe it to me to do this. He felt the reason that he had stuff was to enjoy it, to this eat and drink and be merry. And when this is our motto, yeah, we might work hard sometimes, we might be driven and all of this stuff, but the moment that we have it all of those other things don't matter anymore. When we look at greed in this way, and it comes back to this idea that it is not what you and I do with what we have. It's the way that we look at what we have. It's the way that we see what we have. It's really easy to look at the story in a couple of ways. And I've heard this, both of these things. One way it's easy to look at this and say greed means having money. Greed means having money. Well, last time I checked, if you stick two starving people next to each other with nothing but one piece of bread, you're probably going to have a fight. Right? You don't have to have anything to be greedy. You don't even have to have extra to be greedy. And this idea that we have to have money, and all, I don't have to listen to this part of this because I don't believe that I really have a lot of money, so there's no way that I can be greedy. What about the things that you do own? What about the things that I do feel like, no, that's mine, right? And so as we look at this story, it's really easy to say, yeah, that's a rich man, but I'm not rich. But the root is still this, that I owe me something in this life. If greed is based on a feeling that we're entitled to something, to please ourselves, then it's more than just a money decision. Think of the things that we can do to be greedy in a day. Someone else affects the day that we're in. They make a decision that affects us, makes us have to do something, we didn't plan on it, and we say, you know, that ruined my day, right? My day. Or maybe we heard that our neighbor has something, and we're not sure exactly how they paid for it, but I sure know that I worked harder than they did for that. And why wouldn't I be able to have that, right? Or maybe we're at a restaurant and the server's working so hard and running around to the different tables and all of this. And because maybe our food is not the right temperature or cooked just the right way. Not that we don't say, hey, I need some help here. But we just rip her or him, whoever it is. And we just rip them. And how could you do this? And I want this here. And you weren't fast enough. And then somehow we feel they don't deserve our tip, even though we were there expecting to pay that, right? Hello? And this greed can come into our lives and we think, well, I'm not rich, I don't have this. Or I have to work a little bit extra because no one else deserves this like I do. Let me just step aside as a man and say, as a human man, we have to be very careful not to let greed come into our lives. It's really easy, and I know I'm going to step on some territory here, but I've been there, so I feel that I can. It's very easy for us to look at our spouse and say, look, I'm the one that earned this money, you didn't. I'm saying what we do with this. Amen? That wasn't as loud. It is, though. We as men, and we say, this is my, but we forget the fact God gave us our families to take care of them too. And to take care of their needs and those things. And maybe we feel that the only reason God gave us a spouse is so they can wait for us hand and foot and do what we want them to. But that's not true. Here, I'll make some room at the altar here. No. But we as men have to be super careful of that. Or the way we could talk inappropriately about a woman. Or look inappropriately at a woman. And feel that that's my right to do that as a man. It is not. We don't owe that to ourselves. God gives us things so that we're responsible to them. And it's really easy. At the root of this whole thing is that I owe this to me. Everybody is here for me. It's not true. That's not why we're in this life. Now, I feel that it's really important for us to not get guilt confused with greed. I feel that it's really important for us to say, you have to take care of yourself. You have to make sure that your family is taken care of. You have to make sure that you take care of your needs. And so don't get me wrong, that's not greedy, right? But the idea of greed creeps in is whatever our needs are, whatever the wants, whatever those things that I say, I have to have more and more and more and more. That's where it creeps in. And that's the difference. So don't, maybe you're here and you might beat yourself up and say, I don't deserve this or that. Yes, you do. But you don't just deserve more because you can get more. And that's the difference between this idea of getting more is what gets us in trouble. In this story, Jesus doesn't say that the trouble was with the barns. He doesn't say you shouldn't hold things back and save things up. Because I was looking at a couple of scriptures that would completely go against that. In Proverbs chapter 6, he tells us to be like the ant who gathers one season to prepare for another season. So the idea of saving isn't the problem. The idea of the barns and trying to be careful and stewards of our money, that's not the problem. Proverbs 13:22, believe it or not, this is in the Bible, says somebody should leave good inheritance to their kids and grandkids. We don't talk about that. Work hard and leave something for the people that come after you. It's in the Bible. And so there's nothing wrong with these barns. That's not the problem. In Malachi, what is tithing looked at as coming to the church is this idea of saying, bring it into the storehouse so that we can work on my kingdom, God says, right? So there's nothing wrong with the barns, but it's this idea that we have to have room for more in our lives, wanting more. We use our stuff to secure ourselves, to feel that I don't have to trust in anything else other than me because I'm set. Our identity may be in our savings account. Or we can't enjoy life unless we spend this. You have to. Or excusing not giving to others who are less fortunate because we look and say, well, they don't deserve that. Well, I don't either. Just make sure I'm still on. I have to have this. And that's the root of where this goes, is building bigger barns. And a couple of things that, while this looks harmless, it says, you know what, it doesn't really matter. I'm not Pete Rose. I'm not betting. This isn't going to catch up with me. This is just okay. I can live my Christian life and still think that it's okay just to have as much as I can possibly get. But there's a couple of things that it does. If you're following along, the more a person accumulates, the more they worry about it. The more a person collects, the more they worry about it. Things to fix, maintenance to keep up with, worrying about someone. Lois and I have a different way of looking at our car when we leave it in the parking lot somewhere. My thing is everything I have valuable is with me. As long as we got our kid out of the car, as long as Lois is with me, she has her purse, I have my wallet, I think, why leave the doors locked? You know, they're not, I mean, I know you could hotwire car, all those type of things, but, you know, if somebody's going to do it, they're going to bang the windows and they're going to do what they want to do. That's my approach. Lois's is very, very strict, you know. She wants to keep the car locked. All the cars got, and I'm thinking, so we come back from Walmart and, you know, or whatever, and we got groceries all in your hands and you're trying to fumble and get the key. We don't have automatic locks. And so, you know, you got to fumble to get the key and all that. I'm thinking, this is pointless. Just leave the car unlocked. And so there was this all back and forth. Do we lock, not lock, all this stuff. At her last job, they were going through safety and security, and her last job was a bank also. And one of the things that they warned her about was when you go into work, make sure that you lock your car. Why? Because when you come out of the bank, you never know. There could be somebody waiting in the car there for you, and then all of a sudden you're a hostage in a situation and you have keys to the bank. As they said, don't do that. And all of a sudden, what to me was like there's no value at all. Now, though, you're talking, that's pretty valuable when they have my wife because car wasn't locked at all. And we get more concerned and more worried about something, the more valuable that it is. And so while we think more stuff is the answer, and while we think more things that answer, the more valuable something is, the more we really worry more about it, don't we? And I'm not just talking about people, I'm talking about stuff. I'm talking about things. And that's not the answer. The second thing that greed does is the more we are greedy, it separates us from relationships with others. It separates us from relationships with others, and there's no room for God to give more. I want to show you something. Let's say that all of this stuff here represents things in my life that I am finding security and confidence in. And it doesn't just have to be money, but things that I say I have to have in my life. It's my time. And if anybody else messes with my time and my thing, I'm not happy. Or it's my house, or it's my money, whatever it might be. And what happens is we build security in it. We find security and we say, all of this is how I'm going to build this wall around myself to make sure that I'm okay. And I'm going to pray and I'm going to say, God, I surrender to you, and I'll sing the song, I surrender all, and all of this thing. But the whole time I have all of this stuff and I'm saying, this is what I'm really surrendering to. Because yes, I want God, but I also need this stuff in my life. And what happens is this is bringing security. Why? Because it protects me from something happening. But something else happens when we build these walls. And Kathy, I appreciate you singing about walls. Because something else happens when we build walls to protect ourselves. Is not only do I, get protected by the stuff, it's my life, those things. And yes, the unexpected things can happen, that all this stuff tumbles down. But not only that, is it keeps people out of my life. Because whenever I put stuff before people, whenever I want to do what I want in my time before the relationships that's around me, whenever I put anything that's over top of people, not even just people but God, there's no room. And where is God, who is a great giver, who says, I love to give gifts. He gives like a father. He's not going to give a rock and to somebody who is hungry. And he says this, but where does he have room? Because I have built a wall of my stuff, and even he, because of being gracious and loving, will not break through this. And something else is, relationships last longer than anything else in life. You could lose everything. You could literally lose everything today. Your house, your car, your bank account. We could all go home and discover that things have crashed and none of us get our money. But here's what we don't lose, is we have each other. Right? And this is what happens, though, when I build and rely on my stuff, is I don't allow you into my life. And this is why greed is so dangerous. Not because God says, I don't want you to have fun and I don't want you to have nice things and all of that. I think of Solomon, the wisest man in the world, and while there were some really wacky decisions that he made, like trying to have a bunch of wives. Don't put a bunch of women in one house. I don't care how big it is. Bad idea, okay? I got on the men. Now that's getting on the women. I'm even there, okay? But there was also a blessing that happened, and he received riches from that blessing. So we're not here to say God doesn't want you to have sex, but not using it and putting it on more importance and saying it's all about getting more. Why? Because we're not here to serve ourselves. I know that sounds very, very simple. And if you're a born-again Christian, you know one thing. We're not here to serve ourselves. And you know that. But look at what we do. Do we really serve ourselves? Or do we really say that we serve God, but yet we don't? Everything that we claim, all this stuff that we own, do you know that it will be somebody else's one day? Do you know that somebody else will be making the decisions? It's amazing and yet depressing at the same time in the book of Ecclesiastes that you can work a whole life or kind of take in modern terms, build an entire business and die or retire, and somebody else does what they want to do with it. And it's in some ways depressing, but it's a reminder that that is why that stuff is not the focus of our lives. We'll run out of time before we run out of stuff. You and I are going to run out of time in this life before we run out of stuff. There's always access to stuff. But time is so valuable and important. So here's the solution to greed, just quickly. Generosity. Generosity frees greed. And I know what you might be thinking. Okay, I get it. This is our little tidbit on you have to tithe, give 10% back to the Lord. It's all His. Give when we can. Give something to others. All that is good, but I want to focus on one area as we kind of wind down here. If Jesus judges greed, as we've seen in this scripture, not just based on what we do with our stuff, but the way we look at our stuff, if that's the way that Jesus judges greed, then generosity should be looked at, not just by what we do. Giving this, giving that, I did this, I've given something to someone lately. Not just that, but how you and I look at our stuff is where giving starts too. Ask yourself this question. Why do I have what I have? Why do I have what I have? Lord, what do you want me to do with the extra? And I realize we're talking to people, and I have no idea how much everybody makes here. I would imagine, maybe some of you are doing okay. Maybe some are struggling. And that's okay. And that's why we're not here to say this is what some should. Here is what I'm asking. Look at what you have and say, God, why did you give it to me? What purpose and what reason did you give it to me, and how can I be generous with it? Not looking and saying, I earned it, so I deserve it, and I store it. I was reading this the other day, this thought, and at first I thought, I don't agree with this, and then I kept chewing on it. It said, if all your money is spoken for before you have access to each paycheck, greed has an all-access pass to your heart. Now, I want to stop here and say that I realize that some of us in the body of Christ are struggling and are going paycheck to paycheck. And I've been there, and there's weeks that we're there. And I respect how hard that you're working, and it is simply amazing what some of you have been able to do, just making it week after week after week. It's been amazing, and God's blessing on you. And so by saying that, we're not saying that if you don't have the extra and all that, that's bad. That's not it. But all my money spoken for, as I look at bills, as I look at things, as I look at all of this stuff, can I look at it and say honestly, okay, I'm just trying to make it, or I feel that I have to have certain things in my life? That's all I'm saying. Is there certain things in our life that I feel I have to have? As Americans, what we have to have is really a lot different than many other parts of the world. And am I willing to look at it and say, God, why have you given me what you've given me? See, the problem isn't not having money or having money, that I buy this or buy that. That's not the problem. Not knowing why God has given me what He's given me is the problem. That I'm not even thinking to use and say, God, how would you have me use what you have given me? I want you just quickly, this is how we're going to close here. I want you to quickly pull out the back of your outline and turn it over. A lot of times when we talk about this, it's really easy to look and say, yes, when I have something, I'm willing to give it. Lord, you give me something, I'm willing to give it. But we forget to look at the things that we do have. Very quickly, if you've got a pen or a pencil, just very quick, jot down, and we're going to do this for like a minute, just jot down the things that you have, that you possess. Your house, your car, you can put, oh, that picture that Aunt so-and-so gave, whatever comes to your mind. Just quickly, just write it down, just very quick. And if you don't have a pen or something, just think through your house. Think through the stuff. For some of us, and my upstairs might not be so long taking through. You go downstairs. There's a lot of things down there to go through, and a lot of stuff in boxes, and a lot of things. But think of all of the stuff that you have. List as much as you can, and you can do this in your own time. But I want us to do this here for a very, very specific reason. I want us to see something. It's really easy to say, God, I don't have much to offer. I don't have things. But as you go through your list, as you go through it in your mind, and a couple of you that are writing are going to be frustrated because we're going to stop here in a second, and you can pick up later and do this. But as you go through and think through the possessions that you have, I want you to look at what you've got. If you've got 6 things or 2 things or 15 things because you're a fast writer, I want you to look at what you've got. Now I want you to check by them. What could you not live without? Now, I'm not picking. I'll tell you why we're doing it. We're not saying, okay, go home and get rid of it. That's not what we're saying. But check, what could you not live without? I mean literally not live without. Hold on. What could you not live without? And I mean you would be not able to make it without it, not able to function without it. Were there any things that you checked? Were there some things that you looked at and you say, yep, I maybe, or I guess you'd say not checked. that you looked and you said, yeah, there were some things that I could live without? Anybody find that? Maybe some? Okay. That's okay. We're not picking on that. That's not what we're doing. What I'm saying is now all of us that would find even just one thing that we say we could live without, we can honestly say that God has given us more than what we need. Amen? If it's one thing or 10 things, God has given us extra. And so here's the question we can now ask. God, what do you want me to do with my extra? Not telling you go home, sell your TV. You know, pastor would like to come over and watch a ball game on a nice, flat. I'm not telling you any of that. What I'm saying simply is bring this to the Lord and say, why have you given me what you've given me? And am I honoring you by being generous with the extra? Many times, again, we look and we say, when I have it, I'll give it. When we don't have enough, we're really quick to pray, God, give me enough, right? How many have been there that you had a week that you don't have enough? You don't know where the bill's going to come from. You don't know where the food's going to come from. You're straight and you're like, we got some change to go get something to eat, And we've been there, and we're really easy to say, God, why don't I have enough? And we call our friends, help me this week, pray with me that I have enough, right? And we're really easy to ask God, why don't we have enough? But what if we have too much? Are we willing to do the same thing and say, God, why have you given me more than enough? Again, I want to say this one more time. Don't get me wrong. I'm not promoting, go home, sell this, sell that. What I am saying, you ask God, why have you given me more than enough? And am I willing to honor you with what I've been given? There's a story of a man who attended this church down in Atlanta, Georgia. I don't know, 20, 30,000 people or so. And he was a pretty rich man, a businessman in his 40s, and he had gotten himself to the place that he told his pastor, he said, I'm going to retire early. And good for him. Good for him. He had worked hard. He had invested. He had a gift of making money and all of this. And what he had decided that he was going to do was retire. And guess what? A pastor's dream. I am going to work for the church for free. You tell me what to do. And if any of you are interested about that, you can. No, I'm just kidding. But this is a pastor's dream, and excited and all of this. And he goes to work and he said he just didn't feel like he fit in and the staff meetings and all this type of stuff and just struggled. And finally he said, he went to the pastor one day and he realized something. He said, Pastor, I have to get back to work. Well, you don't need to work. You've got all of it. He said, no, but God has given me a gift to make money. God has given me a gift that I know who to invest in and who not to and all of this stuff. And God has given me a gift. And I feel like it's my duty to make as much money as I can, because then all of the extras I can give more. And he became a giver, not just to their ministry, but helped them start churches and all of this stuff. And he wasn't on their staff. He wasn't pastoring, all of that stuff. But all he simply said was this: God has given me something that I realized was his, and that I'm willing to use it and not be greedy, but be generous. And that's all I'm saying to us today. Not how much money do you make, not what do you have, get rid of it, all of that. No, what do you have? And you take this, you look at what do I have, and how can I use this to be generous? Because if not, very quickly, if it doesn't get given, it becomes baggage. Let's stand and pray together.